Hello and fáilte to the very first episode of Undercover Irish. It's Misha Olin, I'm your host. I'm delighted to have you here. This is the podcast that we're going to go deep into Irish history, Irish language, social history, and looking at modern events and adding some context to those as well. But for today, we're going to look at how the Irish were ahead of the Stoics, ahead of some of the more modern practices like CBT and mindfulness. And it's all because it's all encoded within our language, our national tongue. So without further ado, let's get going. Alright, Ling. Okay, so the question is, how did the Irish invent CBT and Stoicism and all of that? To understand this, first of all, we need to understand the concept which is called linguistic relativism. Now, don't worry about the terminology, let's break it down. Essentially, it's the idea that the language that you use, the words that you use, they affect how you perceive and understand the world. That the language that you're using in your everyday, going about your everyday business, they tend to affect how you think and how you view and how you perceive the world. And it can become apparent in a number of different areas. So time and space is a very good example of this. In the English language, people tend to think about the past as being behind them and the future is in front of them. So if you're using English and you're thinking in the English language, your understanding of time is most likely to be horizontal, like the timeline that you imagine kind of goes horizontally, left to right. But in other languages, so for example, in Chinese, Mandarin Chinese, they would refer to like last month as up month, being above, and next month being down month. You'll have to forgive me on the lack of translations that I have on that. But it's what's important about the understanding here is that one is up and one is down. So in that understanding of time becomes vertical, up, down. In the Andes, in the Bolivian Andes, there's a language, Aymara, which is 1 million speakers or more. And in it, the past, because the past is known and can be seen and understood, it's actually in front of you in the way that they understand it. So that goes completely against the English understanding of the future being in front of you. In this understanding of it, because the past is known and it's visible and it can be seen, it's in front of you, it lies in front of you, whereas the future, which is unknown, lies behind you because you have no way of understanding what that could be. Consider this one, right? In Australia, there's an Aboriginal language, one of the languages of the original native people in Australia, the first people. And rather than using left and right, so they don't have a term for left or right, because they use compass points for everything. Everything is north, south, east, and west. So even when you're talking on a very, very small scale, a small spatial environment around you, say you're at a dinner table or you're in a room, you would use north, south, east, and west as opposed to on your left or on your right. So thinking about linguistic relativism in that example, that means that speakers of that language have a constant understanding of where north is, a constant understanding of south, east, and west. So there's no doubt that, like, if you go back over history, this was essential to their development, essential to their survival. So linguistic relativism shows us that the language that we use, the words that we use, profoundly impact on our understanding of the world around us in a small way and in a larger way. So therefore, it must obviously impact how we think about the world and the philosophy that we have. Then imagine, in this one small example, imagine the effect that speaking two different languages has upon how you view the world and how you view your everyday. So if we take English as an example here and we talk about feelings and emotions, we generally tend to say, if you're speaking English, the feeling that you have becomes you. So for example, if you're feeling hungry, which is a feeling, a physical feeling, you tend to say, I'm hungry. Sure, it can be longer than that. You can say, I'm feeling hungry. But generally, in the spoken word, we tend to abbreviate it to, I'm hungry. And what the effect that has, when you think about it, is the feeling in that instance becomes you. It's the entirety of you. It has taken over you. It is everything about you in that instance. Now, in the case of an emotion, whether it's positive or negative, consider how it sounds. So if you're lonely, you say, I'm lonely. I'm feeling lonely, but it becomes abbreviated to, I'm lonely. In that case, or in that situation, you're giving that emotion the entirety of you. That emotion becomes you. If you're feeling sad and you say, I'm sad, again, that emotion becomes you, and it is you in that understanding. And it doesn't have to be just with the negative emotions or the sadder emotions, even the more positive emotions. So if you say, I'm happy, I'm ecstatic, again, you're giving your own agency over to that feeling. It's the entirety of you. Now, the reason why I take this out as an example is, to me, that seems, whether it's a positive or a negative emotion, it seems almost like there's almost a permanency about it. It's something that is there. It's the entirety of you, and it owns you. And there's something that's very, very permanent about that. Now, what I mean will become clear as I go to the Gaeilge. In the Irish language, in Gaeilge, when we're dealing with feelings and emotions, which we'd call mahucán, it's a different understanding. It's a completely different understanding. So regardless of whether you're a Gaeilge or a fluent Irish speaker, whether Irish is dormant within you or whether you have no Irish at all, you'll still be able to understand this. In Irish, as Gaeilge, sa Gaeilge, in Irish, we structure it differently, first of all. So we say, in the first example I gave of hunger, if you were feeling hungry, in Irish we say tá ocras orm. Tá ocras orm. So tá is there is. There is. Ocras is the word for hunger. Orm is on me. Orm means on me. So we don't say I'm hungry. We say there is a hunger on me. Now, if you think deeply about the difference between those two examples, in the English version of it, like I said, my understanding of it is that the feeling in that case is the entirety of you. It has taken over you. And as opposed to that, as Gaeilge, in the Irish version, the hunger is on you. So first of all, the emotion is externalized. In the English version of it, the feeling is internalized, it's taken over you. Whereas in the Irish version of it, the feeling, in this case, the hunger, is external to you. Sure, it's on you, but it's external to you. So there's a little bit of a separation there. It acknowledges that the feeling and you are different things. It's on you, but you're different living beings. And I kind of visualize it almost like a hat or a cloak or a coat. Yes, it's on you right now, but it can be taken off you. So, that there's a solution to it. Obviously, in the case of hunger, eating. But if we think about emotions, so that's a physical feeling, right? But if we think about emotions, whether they're positive or negative emotions, you see that it's a much better philosophical way of thinking of things. So if we think about a negative emotion, the first kind of negative emotion I gave in English was loneliness. And we said, right, I'm lonely, right? As Gaeilge, in Irish, we would say, tá uignas orm. Again, similar structure to the hunger one. Tá, there is, uignas, which is the closest kind of translation to loneliness, orm, and me. And even the word uignas it's very closely linked to uig, which is kind of away from him. So there's something, it kind of acknowledges that this feeling is caused by an absence of something. There's something away from you. Tá uignas orm. So the loneliness is on you. And that's a melancholic, sad emotion. But if we think of it in the Irish grammar structure or the Irish language philosophical way of thinking about it, it's a much better way because there's no permanency in that. It doesn't sound like a diagnosis. it's it's a short-term thing. It's external to you. There's an understanding within it that it will pass, that it can be healed, it can be sorted, that it's a short-term way of thinking. And the same thing applies to the positive things in our lives, the good emotions, the good feelings. Tá áthas orm, there's a happiness on me, rather than saying I'm happy and this is, it's internalized with me or it's taken me over. Asqualing in Irish, we think of it slightly differently. Exact same thing as my image of the happing on you or the cloaking on you. There's a happiness on me. Tá áthas orm. And again, I think this is a much better way of thinking about it because it acknowledges that everything in life is ups and downs. Everything in life is good and bad. That there's a balance within everything that happens. And it's a much kind of a more deeper philosophical way of thinking about it. So taking this example of feelings and emotions, if we compare the English way of thinking, or the way of thinking, the philosophical way of thinking in the English language, and we compare it to the Irish way, the way Asqualing, the natural way, we can see that there's a very, very different, if we apply linguistic relativism to this, we can see that there's a very, very different way of thinking about feelings and emotions in Irish compared to English, both in terms of how we relate to it, like in Irish we have it external to us, and in terms of the time frame, or the hinting at the time frame that it's on us. But obviously if something's on you, it can pass, it can be removed from you. And like for me, I think this is a really much more intelligent and wise way of thinking about things. Now, in the Irish context, imagine that for thousands of years on the island of Ireland, that people have spoken in that way and then therefore thought in that way, and therefore that was the philosophy they had. And in a relatively short historical period of time, so the last couple of 100 years, due to imperialism and colonialism and many other factors, which we might touch on in other episodes, that has changed and changed rapidly. Now, I think that has to have some sort of an influence on people's mindset and people's, their mion agna is what we'd say in Irish, their mindset and the way that they think about things, when something that was so ingrained in your culture and your way of thinking over thousands of years is removed, and all of a sudden you're thinking in a different way. It's pretty profound. But it's something that we should reflect on. That's one very, very small example of how different languages can lead you to think and operate in different ways. Okay, so what does all of that have to do with the proof, or I suppose, of how the Irish were ahead, if you like, of Stoicism and CBT and all of that? So if we go back to ancient Greece, all the way back to ancient Greece, to Athens, there's a guy called Zeno, and he's credited with coming up with the school of Stoicism, which is a philosophy which thrives in ancient Greece and then subsequently spreads to Rome around the 2nd or 1st century BC. Seneca the Younger is one of the kind of main pillars of the movement, and of course Marcus Aurelius would be a name that would be commonly known through Gladiator, obviously, through the film Gladiator. But Marcus Aurelius wrote a book called Meditations, which is kind of regarded as the Bible of Stoicism. And there's a lot of kind of principles within Stoicism, but in terms of, I see like a great kind of a similarity between what Stoicism attempts to do around emotions and how we speak as Gaeilge in terms of our mahucán, our feelings, our emotions. Because Stoicism attempts to externalize them, to give the person power over them. And part of the teaching of Stoicism is the acceptance of fate. Now, Stoicism kind of declines in popularity as Christianity rises, although Christianity takes in an awful lot of the pillars of Stoicism. And I also kind of see a great crossover between the way that we think about mahucán, about feelings and emotions, as Gaeilge in Irish, and things that have become extremely popular, particularly in the Western world, in the last 20, 30 years, you could even say over the last 100 years. So there's been a massive boom in things like mindfulness and CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy. Now, it's very important to point out there's Eastern roots in all of these as well, because sometimes we can be a little bit blind to the importance that Eastern philosophies play, like Buddhism, in some of the practices that become popular in the West. But in the last 100 years, you've seen things like mindfulness and CBT being codified and being unified and being employed across the world, basically, as effective treatments for people and improving people's mindset and improving people's behaviours. The reason why I think it's interesting is because, like I said, it fits in perfectly with the way that we think about emotion and feeling as Gaeilge. And in many ways, you could say, if you reflect on the fact that Irish Gaeilge is one of the oldest written languages in the world still spoken today, and in terms of how long it's been spoken on the island of Ireland, it could predate, certainly I think it would predate Stoicism, and it certainly predates some of the more modern practices by at least 2,000 years. So for me, sometimes we can take these things absolutely for granted. We don't think about them. We don't think about the philosophy behind the words and the phrases that we use. And sometimes we should go a little bit deeper and see these connections that exist between our old language, our old ways of thinking, and some of the more modern interpretations of it that is in the world around us today. So, Sinna Will, thank you so much for joining me. Gura Mila Mahagut for being in my company for this first episode of Undercover Irish. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you gained deeper understanding and a greater appreciation of at least one small aspect of the Irish language. And I hope it was an enjoyable podcast for you. That's the first podcast in the bag. It took a lot longer than it should have, in truth. And I'm hoping to improve my workflow and my ability to get these things together. It's been a learning curve and I'm learning as I go. So I really appreciate your time. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please, please, please share it with a friend who you think might enjoy it, and it might pass 20 minutes for them and they might enjoy it as well. So once again, Gurav Mila Mahagut, keep an eye out wherever you get your podcasts on Monday. Monday is the day I'll be hoping to drop episodes. Araigling Lekela.